This is going to be House File 2576. Chair Hansen, would you like to move your bill?
Mr. Chair, I would move House File 2576 be laid over for possible inclusion.
Chair Hansen has moved House File 2576 to be laid over for possible inclusion. Chair Hansen, to your bill.
Mr. Chair and members, House File 2576, I think is a very simple and straightforward bill. You will see letters in your packet from interesting supporters and opponents for this bill. I would just give maybe some folks an indication of my experience with this, that when I was hired at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture back in 1988, we had a program I created called Rinse and Win to encourage an educational program to properly rinse empty pesticide containers. And then I set up a pilot project for recycling empty pesticide containers. And that was in 1989 and 1990. Went to Mississippi and watched how they did it, and they came up and watched how we did it, and then that became a model for around the country. So almost 40 years of work that has been done on recycling empty pesticide containers. Now, during that time, pesticide containers have changed dramatically. They were often 2.5 gallon jugs. Now they may be smaller, even, hand-sized things, or they may be very big mini bulk containers or larger bulk containers as pesticides have changed. But one thing that hasn't changed is if you burn plastic in open burning, whether it has pesticide residue in it or not, you never get to the temperature high enough to destroy the toxins that are in there. In fact, you spread them because the burn heat is not hot enough. And so I think you have testimony or letters in support of doing this. I know there was a question about waste to energy. What we're talking about here is the responsibility of the end user, whether they are an urban, suburban, or agricultural user. The label says to rinse that container, and once you rinse that container, it's solid waste. So this is relating to the open burning, and it's an 18B, so it is with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. The A1 amendment I had drafted because we were hopeful that maybe we could get the paraquat ban. I'm not going to move the A1 amendment. I am leaving that out there. I know that the Senate has posted a version of paraquat, a paraquat ban, and I believe the Department of Agriculture has another version of the paraquat ban. So I have this amendment out there. I would ask members to consider what we could do rather than what we can't do, and would take any questions on 2576.
Before questions, we'll one more time check if there's anyone in the audience who would like to testify for this bill. All right, then we will move on to questions from committee members for Chair Hansen. Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chair Hansen, just a kind of more of a background question. You referenced the recycling program that you started, and I've had a chance to sit on a county waste management committee, and so a lot of different recycling. What specifically were the, and maybe there wasn't, maybe there was, but what was the market for those empty containers? Whether back then or today, what was their end use in the recycling program? I'm just curious. Thank you, Mr.
Chair Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was a lot of curbs. So it was primarily what they call HDPE, high density polyethylene. If you started mixing the different types of plastic, it limited your use, but the durability and the sunlight impact was mainly curbs. There were some park benches, but it was primarily curbs. And you'd see those at the end painted yellow.
Okay.
Representative Lawrence.
Oh, question. And I don't know if you might know that, Mr. Chair and Chair Hansen, what process did they use to eliminate any residue of chemical in that recycling process? You commented that burning doesn't necessarily get hot enough to do that. What in their process would have eliminated any excess of that it'd be fine to leave in the environment on that level?
Chair Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that was why we had the rinsing, and I actually see some of the lobbyists around here who were around at that time Rinsing it, if you did the triple rinsing and put that rinsate back into the container, then you were getting 99.99% of the product at that time. Now you have different products, that are different packages sometimes now, but that you're using the rinsate for its intended use as the pesticide, and you remove that from the plastic container. That's why it wasn't getting recycled. So we would actually bring a portable shredder out, and I would sit there with a filter mask on, and we would shred the plastic containers. We would drive that on site because it's a lot easier to move dense shred than it is to move empty bottles there. So we would bring the containers around and shred that, and then that shred would go into Gaylord boxes and would go to these non-human contact things like the curb. And the belief was that those would be bound into plastic, like on a curb in a parking lot, that they're embedded into that plastic, that the temperature to melt the plastic would bind and reduce any residual at that time. 40 years ago, different world, but that was what was being done.
All right. Representative Gander had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Chair Hansen, it may not be relevant now because you did not move the amendment, but I wonder if we could get a copy of the Ag Department paraquat ban wording, just so we could factor that in against all of the other bits of information we have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sure we could get that for you. I saw the commissioner move, so would you like to comment? No, okay. Chair Hansen.
Mr. Chair and Representative Gander, we can get that. It's what I would just say is it relates to kind of a special exemption under existing authority. The Commissioner of Agriculture has the authority to, if there's an emergency, if there's something with public health currently, so it defines that ability for a special exemption for the continued use of paraquat. It has, I believe, different dates relating to the end of, and I'm not sure on this, so Petter probably has it, but we have a date for stop sale and then stop use. The issue is if you have a stop sale too far out, then you may have hoarding of people buying it. If you don't want to penalize people who have bought it and can't use it. But then I believe it also has some language for clarifying that the waste pesticide program is there currently to help pick up the product that is the end user is choosing not to use anymore, so it's disposed of safely.
So it looks like we have a representative from the department. If you could identify yourself, and then to Representative Gander's question.
Yes, good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Chair Hansen had it correct in terms
So
of
sorry,
just-
could you identify yourself real quick?
Oh, sorry, Peter Chesset, Assistant Commissioner at Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
Thank you.
Chair Hansen has the broad strokes correctly, and I just wanted to clarify that we were asked for and worked with the Senate on this language. I just wanted to make sure you all understood this was not just an agency initiative. This was in response to a request from the Senate. But we'd be happy to have conversations and work with any member in the House or the Senate on this language moving forward.
And is there, I might ask a follow-up question, is there a cost to that Senate version of the bill?
Yeah, as far as I know, there is still a fiscal note associated with that. That's also part of the conversation is what the overall cost might be, depending on dates and other factors that are being worked on in that language.
Representative Gander, did you have a follow-up?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for allowing me to have that question about the amendment that was not moved. Thank you. Thank you.
Looks like Vice Chair Harder, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair Smith and Chair Anderson. Okay, I see this bill as another regulation on agriculture. Can you tell me, are there any penalties for noncompliance?
Chair Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. They would be, Representative Harder, they'd be the existing penalties under the Pesticide Control Act. So they have administrative penalties, they have civil penalties, and they have criminal penalties. Unless something's changed, generally on the administrative penalties, there is a warning, notice of violation. There's usually several steps when there is repeat action. So we're not adding any additional regulatory, it would be the existing Department of Agriculture regulatory suite that they used, and they could highlight the details, but generally it's I'm not sure if the correct order, but there'd be like a warning, a notice of violation, and then if somebody just keeps doing it over and over again, then you may move to a financial penalty. But they have that administrative authority within the department now. This does not add anything.
Vice Chair Harder?
Yes, thank you, Chair Smith and Chair Anderson. Okay, my next question has to do about the enforcement of compliance. So I'm trying to think of the entire state of Minnesota and how many farmers may have these containers. So who would enforce the compliance? Would that be the state that would come out to enforce it? Would it come down to the county? And if it is the county, would funds go to the county for enforcement? Thank you.
Chair Hansen?
Mr. Chair and Representative Harder, and again, going off of my memory working with the Department of Agriculture, it would be a complaint-driven process. And so when it's complaint-driven, it's not a delegated authority like the feedlot law. 18B rests with the locals do not have that authority, with a couple of small exceptions for the big cities. But it is the Department of Ag. It's going to be their inspectors. They would have to respond. They'd have to document and demonstrate that proof.
Vice Chair Harder, do you have a follow-up? Chair Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have plenty of time. I'd like to call up Mr. Stamper from the department, if he would step forward. You know, sometimes there's misunderstanding about a federal label and a state label, and maybe Mr. Stamper could explain a little bit about if there's differences in labeling between federal and state, in this case, in terms of container disposal.
Mr. Stamper, if you could identify yourself for the record and then begin your testimony.
Mr. Chair, representatives, thank you for the question. Typically, when we talk about the regulation of pesticides, we always lead with the label is the law. Every pesticide label that is approved by the EPA is unique, and each of those different labels have specific language that addresses the hazard, the risk, how to safely use these products, what are considerations that need to be had in the handling, the use, the disposal, all of those different things. And as a function of that, there is, to my knowledge, there is not uniform language on pesticide labels saying, do not burn these containers. They will have language that says, like, dispose of in accordance with, like, state and local regulations, because they're trying to draft something that, you know, that can be enforced across the country.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. Could you identify yourself for the record so we have that?
Sorry. Joshua Stamper, Division Director of Pesticide and Fertilizer Management.
All right. And Chair Anderson?
He's got one more for you.
Don't go away quite yet, Mr. Stamper. Thanks, Mr. Chair. A lot of co-ops, and I think it's in conjunction with the department, have collection points or days you can bring your containers in. Could you tell us how widespread that is in Minnesota?
Yes. Mr. Chair, representatives, every ag chem dealer will take back waste pesticide containers from there. This is something that is offered as a service, because typically the industry doesn't want this. They don't want paraquat jugs blowing across fence lines and stuff like that. But those are things that have historically happened. And, you know, I'm not going to say that burning paraquat or burning containers is common, but it happens. And I think that part of this is also an educational message about how do we make sure that everyone understands, like, what are best practices in handling these products, and how do we make sure that we can safely handle them for the future.
Okay.
Chair Hansen, did you want to say something?
Just on that, that's 36 years of having container collection programs. So the idea that they have that ability, you know, so the folks that maybe the small fraction that are burning them, having that law clearly there gives the department the authority. It's not that they don't have another option. They've had it for 36 years.
Chair Anderson? No further questions? All right, it looks like no more questions from committee members. So Chair Hansen, would you like to have any closing comments?
Mr. Chair, this is the last committee that the DFL will be chairing. There is one more committee on Wednesday. Often there are extraordinary things that happen at the legislature. But I would, just reach out an open hand to continue these discussions to see what's possible, knowing where our priorities are. And I'm not just speaking for myself, I'm speaking for our committee on the Democratic side. I renew my motion to lay over 2576.
76. Thank you, Chair Hansen. He has renewed his motion that House File 2576 be laid over, and the bill is laid over.